Good morning, students. This is the continuation of my previous lecture on mass spectrometry, and we have discussed up to this point. And here in this slide, I have explained what are the general applications. And there are two general applications. One is a qualitative and quantitative information can be obtained from mass spectral data, and the qualitative information always comes from the x-axis, that is the m by z value is plotted, right? And by looking at the position from where it is located, a particular peak, that we can say whether whether we can say that a particular fragment is present. Therefore, there is a possibility of so and so molecular structure. So such a conclusion can be drawn from the x-axis peaks, and then the intensity information from actually always gives you the quantitative information. So how much is present? Okay, for example, you have a particular peak, and with a 100% abundance, then we say it is a most of majority of the fragments are basically of that kind. Okay, and if it is having 50%, we say some other information. And moreover, the intensity is actually related to the abundance in the mass spectrum, abundance of a particular fragmented ion in the mass spectrum spectrometer. So the one which is having maximum intensity, that is 100%, that we say it is a base peak, and the extreme right hand side, typically we observe the molecular ion peak. And please remember that the molecular ion can be sometimes the base peak, but it need not necessarily be true always. Okay, sometimes majority of the times, except the aromatic compounds, we don't get the any stability is is another issue. So molecular ion can be seen only if it is very stable in the mass spectrometer. Otherwise, we don't see that one. And then the form, whatever it is formed, the molecular ion, it will collide with another molecular ion or a neutral molecule, and then it forms a fragmented ions. So further fragmentation takes place. Therefore, so it is not always true that we will get a molecular ion peak. And there are several compounds of this kind as we proceed, as we discuss, as we are going to discuss the fragmented ion rules and general observations, that several compounds of don't show the molecular ion, but at the same time that many of the category molecules, they do show molecular ion. Okay, so the applications are explained in the previous slide, so I need not to explain this. And then there are several advantages and disadvantages with the mass spectrometry. The mass spectrometry can be, if you compare with the atomic optical spectrometry data, that is one of the data which allows you to estimate what is the quantity of a particular atom is present in a given sample, can be estimated by atomic emission spectroscopy. So that spectroscopy, whether a particular element is present or not, we can say again from the position of the peak. Okay, so there the atomic emission, we see it is a wavelength versus intensity. The intensity of the signal basically gives you how much it is present. Okay, so as you compare with such a technique, the mass spectrometry is somewhat superior in many ways, and its detection limits are almost 3 orders of magnitude better. So it is a femtomolar concentration also can be detected very easily without any problem. Easily, and one of the major disadvantage with the atomic emission spectroscopy and is basically the complex. This is one of the atomic emission spectrum of a sample. As you can see here, the peaks are very clumsy and then very complex to interpret. Unless you have a thorough understanding and experience, you can basically interpret the data. And the bottom one, what you see here is the bottom one, what you see here is a mass spectrum of a sample. As you can see here, we have a limited number of peaks, therefore easy to interpret. Okay. At the same time, it has its own disadvantages. For example, the cost of the instruments are two to three orders higher. Okay, that is one problem. And sometimes the instrument drifting and maintaining the vacuum inside the spectrometer, and the interference effects are some of the major problems of mass spectrometry. How mass spectrum is recorded, that theory, very briefly I will give. I don't give much details. And the principle I already mentioned, ionization, separation of ions, and detection of ions. So this is the basic principle of a mass spectrometer. Any mass spectrometry that you take, that is the principle. And how the separation takes place is one important aspect that one should remember. The separation mostly takes place based on the very simple technique which are known for quite some time to physicists. So the separation majorly takes place with the help of the electric and magnetic fields. Okay, and in fact, the magnetic fields are the ones used by J.J. Thomson, right? And you may recall the principle, or you may recall the Rutherford theory on atomic theory. The alpha particle, when proposing certain proposals about the structure of atom was based on this type of analysis. You remember that the alpha particle which are having a positively charged ones, and there are some experiment where he has conducted when he allowed that alpha particle to pass through, right? Then he has used a magnetic field and electric field. So based on the deflection, they used to say the particular one which is present, how the nucleus is having positively charged positive charge. That was proved based on this, by applying the electric and magnetic fields, right? So the same type of strategies are generally used in the mass spectrometry to separate the ions. That is a major concern, right? So ionization is one concern. Then the separation of their ions is another major concern. So for this to do that, we have a couple of components within the system, within the mass spectrometer, that they will do. And I don't want to go much more details about it because this is something organic spectroscopy. Therefore, I may not discuss in an elaborate way, but you should remember the point that the separation takes place based on the m by z value. Okay, based on the m by z value, because we are going to use electric and magnetic field in any of the analyzer, or sometimes we do use some kind of radio frequency also when you talk about the cyclotron or quarter pole ion trap, quarter pole analyzer. Okay, so mostly the ionization has certain techniques and the separation has certain techniques. Okay, the separation takes place any of the mass spectrum. The ions are basically separated by using the electric and magnetic fields. Okay, and the mass to charge ratio, mass to unique unique fragmented ion will have a unique m by z value. Okay, and it will have its own velocity, and it will have its own acceleration, right? So therefore, that is the one that that when you basically allow it to pass through the electric and magnetic field, that take a circular path. Basically, this is what the Rutherford also observed, right? J.J. Thomson also observed that so when they are passing, suppose you have a charged species and it is passing by, and when they see the electric or magnetic field, they used to deflect and they take a circular path. The circular path means that it will have a radius, and that is the one characteristic normally people exploit. People use it in any of the mass spectrometer to separate, and detection is again based on the mostly the multipliers and Faraday cups and cyclotrons, etc. And all these things are basically beyond the scope of our course, but just I want to give a brief idea how this really works, and you should not be blank. That's my plan, taking you through this particular lecture. And I already given the brief idea about what are the components are generally required to generally present in a mass spectrometer. That we have majorly that there is a analyzer. The analyzer, before the analyzer, we have injection system through which the sample is injected. Okay, so mass spectrometer will have three major components: the ionizer, ion source or ionizer, and then the ion analyzer, and then the detection. So those are the things. And before the first component, there is another component, what we call it as an injection system. And this injection system is typically will have a syringe and all, so which will take the sample in the liquid form, and then it will be injected through a kind of heater, which actually produce the gaseous phase molecules, because we should not have any kind of other interferences, other species. So normally what we do is that the solvent molecules will evaporate. We will evaporate, and we take all the molecules into the gaseous phase, and those are the gaseous phase molecules we allow to go to the ionizer. So ionizer actually is the one actually ionizes, and how it is ionizing, those things we will discuss. And please remember that the total system just after the injection, everything will be under ultra high vacuum, because as we are dealing with the charged species, then if you keep it at atmosphere, then normally they do interact with the atmosphere gases and all. Therefore, we will not get the expected results, and a lot of interferences will be there. In order to avoid any kind of interference, normally all any of the, whatever the mass spectrometer that you take, it will be with under the ultra high vacuum. So this is, you can see here, all these are under ultra high vacuum. Okay, those are the injector system, and also nothing to worry about it. I may not discuss these points, and this is the point I'd like to share with you. Right, the first component is of our great importance, because that gives you an idea of what kind of fragments that we will be getting, how many fragments we will be getting, whether we will get a molecular ion or not, whether we will get M plus 1 ion or not. So there are certain points that we understand based on the ionizer or the ion source. That is the first component. What is the job of an ionizer? The job of ionizer is that it forms ions. It makes the ions. So it, whatever the gaseous molecule that it sees, those gaseous phase molecules, it will basically ionizes. Okay, it will ionizes. That is the purpose. And how do you ionize? And how many ways are there to ionize? And there are several ways, and some of the techniques which are generally followed for ionizing gaseous phase molecules is basically listed in this table. Right, the one thing is gas phase molecules. Okay, as I said that we will have an injector, and the injector will inject the sample in a solvent, which is a solution of the sample, basically injected in a heater. That heater will heats up the sample, and then the solvent will be removed, and then as a result that we will have a gaseous phase molecule, because the heater is kept at very high temperature, just above the boiling point or the melting point of that one. So we will have a gaseous phase molecule, and these gaseous phase molecules can be ionized in three different ways. That is, electron impact ionization is one ionization technique, and then chemical ionization and field ionization. These are the three general techniques. Okay, if your sample is in gas phase, that is how we should do it. Usually this is generally followed for samples, liquid samples, and of course it is not always true, but then even solid also you can dissolve in a solvent and then you can inject. You can do anything. And this is one type of ionization. This is one category of ionization under which you have a EI ionization, electron impact or electron ionization technique, chemical ionization, field ionization. Another category is a desorption technique based on desorption. Okay, so the sample gets desorbed when it interacts with a certain external forces that usually it desorbs from the matrix, from the area. So that is another techniques under which we have a couple of techniques: field desorption, electrospray ionization, MALDI ionization, fab ionization. So these are some of the desorption techniques that we have. Okay, so we will be discussing some of the important ionization techniques, because these are some of the important aspect as a chemist that we should know. Because when you are interpreting that, you will be given a EI mass uh, or maybe CI mass, whatever. It basically it depends upon the mass spectrometer that under which a sample is get analyzed. So I think you also remember that the mass spectrometer, any mass spectrometer is named based on the ionization and the mass analyzer. Ionization and the mass analyzer. That means uh, if I say EI mass analyzer, sometimes that EI is coupled with the TOF. TOF is a analyzer. Okay, EI TOF. That means you should know that the ionization is EI, electron ionization. TOF, time of flight, is the detector that is the analyzer that is used to separate. So any mass spectrometer is basically labeled like that. Okay, EI, or there, or else sometimes that is MALDI TOF, MALDI TOF. So matrix assisted laser desorption ionization is the MALDI, and then TOF, time of flight. So TOF, this one is another one. Okay, and then ESI TOF is another combination of mass spectrometer. So it depends upon the manufacturer how they are making an instrument, and based on the requirement of the end user, they manufacture different models, and different models will have different combinations of these ionization source, ionization technique, and ionization source, as well as the analyzation, ion separation technique. Okay, and those are basically labeled based on the ionization as well as the analyzer technique. Okay, now the ion sources or the uh, ionizers are broadly classified into two categories. One is the hard ionization uh, techniques. The other category is the soft ionization uh, uh, ion sources, hard and soft. How? What do you mean by hard and soft ion sources or ionizers? Okay, there are there is basically only two techniques which are actually comes under soft ionization, and I would say in fact it is only one technique which comes under hard ionization. What do you mean by hard ionization? This hard ionization is like a indiscriminator. That means the ionization happens such that you will not see even the molecular ion also, because in that particular ionization technique we use very high energy resource such that the molecule basically sliced into many fragments, and also they even rupture the bonds, many bonds, not one bond, that many bonds also it will be ruptured present in a molecule. Okay, so that is, we say it is a hard ionization. Hard ionization, we use very huge energy so that the molecule is totally sliced into many fragments, and then it will form different fragments. Okay, so if you are using very high energy source, then that is quite obvious that the molecule basically breaks down into several fragments. That is the definition or the explanation about the hard ionization technique. And EI technique, EI, electron ionization or electron impact technique, which I have just shown in the previous slide, is the only technique which comes under the hard ionization. Of course, even chemical ionization also can be said under certain conditions. Okay, the electron impact ionization is the hard ionization technique. Why is it so? That I shall give the explanation as we proceed. But for the time being, remember that. And the soft ionization, except that EI ionization, most of the other things, techniques, like we call it as a soft ionization technique. Why? Because we don't use such a huge amount of energy to interact with the molecule under the investigation. We give only little amount of energy, such that it gives little fragments, and then we get the molecular mass and some kind of little bit information about the sample. Okay, so that is the soft ionization technique. And then the chemical ionization onwards, rest of the thing, except EI technique, rest of all the techniques, generally it is known as the soft ionization technique. Okay, the soft ionization technique or ionizer usually produce very less amount of less amount of peaks in the spectrum, mass spectrum. This is the best example you can see here, that you have only few you have only few peaks are there, and here you can see that there are several peaks are there. So hard ionization will have several peaks, whereas the soft ionization technique will have few peaks. So the advantages and both advantages, disadvantage and advantage, both are there with both the technique. Again, I said many times the same point, that sometimes if you are dealing with unknown sample, we need more clues. Only when you have more clues, it is a bit easier to solve the puzzle. That means, to find out the exact molecular structure. On the other hand, suppose if you have already some kind of primary information about a molecular structure, and then you just want to confirm whether so and so is present or not. Okay, for example, that you have a NMR technique, and you have X-ray diffraction technique, and you have a FTIR technique, and then various other techniques are there, and your sample is already underwent all those technique, and then you have some kind of preliminary information. And if you want to further confirm whether so and so molecule is present or not, in that case you don't need hard ionization technique. You just need molecular weight of the compound, so that you can interpret directly to your thing. So in that case you don't need hard ionization, only just go for soft ionization. So but the soft ionization, you cannot use it if you are really interested to solve the puzzle of an unknown molecule. That is there. Okay, so both the advantages and disadvantages are there with both the techniques, and it's up to you how do you take up further. And I'm going to just explain briefly that a few ionization technique and few very briefly the ionizers, ion analyzers in the coming few slides. The first technique I would like to discuss is the EI technique, electron impact ionization technique. In this method, I just already mentioned that that the very huge amount of energy will be basically transferred to the sample, as a result of which the sample gets fragmented, and then we will have so many fragments. Okay, in this technique, typically what we use is a very high energy electron beam to interact with the sample. Very high energy electron beam, typically of the order of 70 electron volts. That is the potential. You have the electron which are produced from the tungsten filament, they are basically passed through and accelerated to very high kinetic energy, that is basically 70 electron volt, and then that is the electron beam that will be allowed to interact with the sample. Why 70 electron volt? 70 electron volt is the which, if you basically look at and try to calculate the de Broglie wavelength, that is where the wavelength, actually the wavelength of the electron beam exactly matches with the bond, typical bond orders and bond length. Therefore, there will be a nice resonance between the electron beam and the bonds. Okay, so there will be a nice resonance. That means the energy of the electron beam will be transferred to the bonds in a molecule. That you take any molecule, and then molecule basically get excited, and then it will be fragmented. That's the purpose of using that 70 electron volt. Okay, so that is the one. So as the schematic diagram of the electron ionization is represented here. You can see here on this side you have a gaseous phase molecules are uh, basically channelized to this direction, and this is where that you have a filament. You know, this is a thermionic filament. Tungsten filament is there. When you heat the filament, tungsten filament, it's just like our the bulb, you know, round bulb. It basically gets heated up, and then electrons are produced, and then electrons are going in this direction from one direction to the other direction. So the electrons are basically shuttling from these two electrodes. Okay, these are the two electrons, and the perpendicular direction that you have the molecules in gas phase, they are coming and meeting. So this is where the molecules get interact with the the electron beam, which is having very high potential of 70 electron volts. And as a result of this, that uh, there is a nice resonance, and then the molecule gets ionized, right? So since we are using a very huge amount of energy, the molecule basically sliced into many fragments. Okay, and then after this after this ionization point, that we have the fragmented ion, and these fragmented ions are basically taken out by using this is called accelerating plates, right? These accelerating plates will have a different potential energy, and they will basically take this they will just, you know, accelerate the fragmented ions into several moles, and then they will send it to the mass analyzer, right? So these are the accelerating plate. That means basically simply they accelerate the ions which are produced in the ionization chamber, electron ionization chamber, and they will give it to the mass analyzer. The mass analyzer will analyze the ions based on some criteria that we will discuss in the second part of my discussion. Okay, under this technique, what is happening, that we use a high energy. Simply you remember that the high energy electron beam is allowed to interact with the gaseous phase molecules, which basically results the molecule ion, and the molecular ion basically collide with the molecules and the other molecular ion, and then we we get lot of fragments. Okay, since we are using high amount of energy, potential energy of the electron beam, we see huge number of fragments. Okay, so this is just a illustrative slide where you can see the fragmentation, how it takes place. That suppose that you have a molecule, and the molecule composed of A, B, C, D, some kind of functional groups or some kind of bonds. Okay, so when they interact with the electron, then the molecular ion is formed, and this molecular ion basically can lose. Okay, this molecular ion can lose the BCD radical, and then you will get a positively charged, or else A radical can be eliminated from this. A can leave as a radical, and then BCD molecules, BCD fragment can be formed. Okay, cation, positively charged BCD can be formed, which can subsequently undergo some kind of BC plus D plus. Okay, so on the other hand, the CD radical can eliminate, or AB radical can eliminate, and subsequent fragments that you can easily understand from this slide. Okay, so there are several ways, and this is one way of fragmentation. The other way is that rearrangement followed by fragmentation. That ABCD radical cation. Okay, I think I should tell what is this notation. It's very important that we write M plus radical. Okay, this indicates molecular ion. Okay, when molecule is neutral one, and then when one electron it is knocked out, it will be positively charged. Then it will be a radical. So the radical positive radical cation basically. Molecular ion is nothing but the radical cation. Okay, so that is the way we normally represent, but some people write in this fashion like dot plus. So whatever it is, that is fine. So this notation or this type of notation, anything is okay to represent the molecular ion. That is the molecular ion notation. So the molecular ion initially forms, when you knock out one electron in this method, it will form initially molecular ion. If it is stable enough, that will be detected. Otherwise, it will undergo subsequent reactions. So one of the possibilities that rearrangement followed by fragmentation. So A, B, C, D, you have this one, but instead it can undergo a little bit of rearrangement, A, D, B, C molecular ion, and then it can undergo this type of fragmentation process. Okay, collision is also possible that the in the ion chamber, you must realize that very few molecular ions only will be formed. Not everything, but very few molecular ions will be formed. Out of the 1 million molecule that you may see, maybe a little number of, let's say 10 molecular ions will be formed. And these molecules will interact with the neutral molecules. Molecular cations will molecular radical ion basically will interact with the neutral molecule, and then further fragmentation can take place, right? Subsequent, at the interaction, the time of interaction, initial interaction, we'll have only a few molecules are get ionized. But as the time increases, that those primary ions, radical cations which are formed, basically interact with the neutral species, they can undergo. As a result, after some time, we see a lot of fragmented ions. But initially, you may not see everything is basically fragmented to molecular ions, and later on, they will not undergo subsequent fragmentation. Okay, so this is something that you remember. And another important point is that the radicals cannot be detected in the mass spectrometer. Radicals cannot be detected in the mass spectrometer because the time scale, the lifetime of the radicals is much shorter. Okay, so therefore they cannot be detected. Only the positively charged and also molecular radical cations can be detected in the mass spectrometer. So this type of A radical, this is a radical, and CD radical, AB radical, this cannot be detected by any of the mass spectrometer. Why? Because we know the basic chemistry that the radicals are much unstable species. That means their lifetimes are very less. And if you have a better detector, then it is possible. But the detector, what kind of detector? The detector which are used in the mass spectrometers are not that very sensitive. Therefore, usually we cannot detect the radicals. Any of the radical cannot be detected. Only the positively charged can be detected. And molecular, base peak. I think base peak and the molecular ion peak explanation I already gave in the previous class. That the peak with the 100% abundance, we call it as a base peak. Okay, the peak with the 100% relative abundance, we call it as a base peak. The other peaks are basically the other peaks represent the abundance of the XYZ fragmented species and their abundance in the mass spectrometer in a given time. Okay, for example, that this is some alcohol, and this alcohol will form always a nice molecular nice fragmented ion which is having 31 at this. Okay, and this actually 31 represent this type of fragmented species. Okay, and then since it is alcohol, it loses the water, so it is a primary alcohol. As a result, that you may not see a very intense molecular ion. Okay, and if you see the difference between this and this, that the one water molecule is eliminated and then this will form. Okay, so this is a simple EI mass spectrum where you can see a lot of fragments. Okay, these fragments really help us to solve the puzzles. Well, the advantages and the disadvantages. It is quite obvious that we will have a lot of information that therefore the information can be easily interpreted, and then we can deduce it is possible to identify the molecules easily. On the other hand, that since we have a lot of peaks are there, therefore we always get confused with uh, we always have a confusion, and we will have always a difficulty in interpreting the data sometimes. Okay, so both advantages and disadvantages from the same point of view. Okay, and as you know that this is the destructive technique where we lose a sample because the molecule is get ionized, and then for you cannot recover your sample. So this is one of the destructive technique. That means we lose the sample after the analysis. But there are some other techniques like FTIR. You get back your sample. Similarly, visual absorption spectrometer, visible absorption data when you use it. All the samples you can recover and use it actually for different purposes, or NMR. So we have several non-destructive techniques are there, spectroscopic techniques. And the mass spectrometry, especially the EI mass spectrum, that we lose the sample because molecules basically sliced with a high energy electronic beam. And the next ionization is the chemical ionization. The chemical ionization is more or less similar to that of the EI ionization technique, where the ionization, the same process, there is no difference at all, but only small difference is that we will not use only molecule alone, but then we use a reagent gas. We use a reagent gas along with our molecule. Okay, the ratio of molecule and the reagent gas is 1:1000, typically of the order of this much. That means that 1:1000 ratio, one portion is your molecule, and the 1000 portions are your reagent gas. What kind of reagent gas? Reagent gas can be methane, propane, butane, this type of reagent gas. We use in a large excess quantity, typically of the order of 1000:1. And then the molecule in the gas phase is mixed with the reagent gas, and that will be passed through that will be allowed to interact with the electron beam, what we have discussed in the previous case. The electron ionization technique that we are using 70 electron volt electron beam, thermionic electron beam, is allowed to interact with the molecule in the gas phase. Then that is producing this one, the fragmented ions. The same fashion, same thing, nothing, no difference. Only difference is that here, instead of using a simple molecule in the gas phase, we will mix with the gas molecule with a little bit of little excess of the reagent gas. What do you mean by reagent gas? This is a reagent gas that primarily it interacts with the electron beam, not the molecule. So there are several reagent gases up there. Just example is methane. You can just mix your molecule with the methane gas, and then you just push into the ionization chamber, then allow it to interact with the electron beam of 70 electron volt. Then what happens is very, very interesting. Since we have large excess quantity of the reagent gas, the electron beam of that much huge energy, electron beam will not interact with the molecule first. Instead, it will interact with the reagent gas. Why? Because that it is in large excess, and the probability of this electron interacting with since it is a large excess quantity of reagent gas is there, 1000 molecules out of 1000 molecules are reagent gas, only one is the your molecule. So initially the electron will interact with only the reagent gas. Okay, and as a result it will produce some kind of ions of the reagent gas, and these reagent gas ions interact later on with the molecular ion. Therefore the fragmentation takes place. Okay, so that is the process in the chemical ionization. The chemical ionization comes, the name chemical ionization comes from the concept that we are using some kind of a chemical, we are adding a chemical in addition to your sample, which is under investigation. That's how it is different from the electron ionization. The same process, but only a small difference that we use a small chemical. That chemical generally it is a gaseous chemical. We mix it with the sample, and that we allow will push it in the ionization chamber. Ionization takes place, and since since we are not allowing the molecular ion molecule to directly interact with the electrons, we will get less fragments, right? Because you have huge amount of reagent gases there. So initially those will get interact with the electrons, and then later on, those ions will interact with the molecule. Therefore, the fragmentation will be minimized this way. Okay, that's the purpose of this electronization. Here is a little bit of example how the ionization takes place in the CI technique. Chemical ionization technique is illustrated here. Just take a methane, ethane, right, and propane, butane. These are some of the reagent gas. Sometimes ammonia also can be taken, isobutane. So these are some of the reagent gas. Let's say if you are taking if you are adding methane as a chemical to the simple EI technique, and then this is what exactly happens. This methane gas interact with the electrons, and then it will produce a methane molecular radical cation. Okay, methane positively charged radical, and then it forms. It also forms. Initially this forms, and then later on, it will undergo a little bit of fragmentation. This will interact with the neutral methane molecule, and then this will form CH5 plus, and then plus CH3, and then CH3, this CH3 plus will interact with the methane, and then it will form this. Okay, so these what we call it as, these are the primary ions of the reagent gas or the chemical. Okay, since the electron beam is interacting primarily to the methane gas, they will produce CH5 plus, C2H5 plus, CH3 5 plus. This type of primary ions it will be produced, and these primary ions will undergo a little bit of a secondary process like proton transfer and hydrogen transfer, etc. For example, this is a primary ion which is formed, and this, when it interact with the molecule, this will when it interact with the molecule, and then what exactly happens is this. So it can give one proton. Okay, it can give one proton to the molecule. As a result, MH2 plus can form. Please remember, this MH is nothing but our molecule which is having one proton, at least one proton. Okay, it is nothing but our molecule, but is having at least one proton. So I just expanded and written MH. Don't think that this is something different. It is a molecule, and this molecule has a proton, and CH3 CH5 plus ion can interact with the molecule which is having at least one proton, and it can basically transmit one proton to the molecule, and a proton M plus ion can be formed, right? Because a proton is having molecular mass of 1, right? Similarly, this is another type of proton. The C2H5 plus can interact with the molecule, and it can also give this type of thing. And then it can form this type of neutral species. And then on the other hand, the C2H5 plus can interact this way, and then the hydride from the molecule can be abstracted. Hydride from the molecule can be abstracted, and then as a result, that M plus can be formed, and then ethane molecule can be formed. Okay, so these are several secondary process can takes place after the primary events. Okay, these are the primary events that takes place when the molecule, when the electron beam is interacting with the chemical or the reagent gas. Initially they forms a primary ions, and these primary ions get interacted with the molecule, and several reactions like proton transfer, many types of proton transfers are possible, and proton transfers, hydrogen transfers, all those things, charge transfer. So there are many things can be possible. So this is just a illustrative spectrum is here. On the left side is you can see here this is a soft ionization technique. As you can notice that only few peaks you can see here, whereas in the hard ionization there are several fragmented species are there. Okay, so that is the explanation about the electron ionization and the chemical ionization technique. Okay, and I must also tell you that in this technique it will form adduct. Adduct formation also quite a common phenomena in the CA technique. Adduct formation. What do you mean by adduct? For example, in the primary process, primary ionization process, C2H5 has formed. The C2H5 can simply add to your molecule. The C2H5 can simply couple with simply can couple with your molecule, and then it can form it can show a molecular ion at this, right? At M plus 29 is possible because of this. Okay, M plus 29 peak we can see because of this adduct formation. Similarly, M plus 1 peak is possible because of the proton transfer. M minus 1 is possible because the hydride transfer. Hydride means that the one proton from the molecule is taken out. Therefore, there is a hydride transfer, H minus. Okay, and then these are the some of the general features of chemical ionization technique. Okay. Right. With this, we can move on to the next ionization source, that is a matrix-assisted laser desorption or ionization technique. That is MALDI. MALDI technique is based on a phenomena what we call it as a laser ablation. Laser ablation. Laser ablation is a phenomena which basically allow a solid sample to dissolve from a solid surface. Allow a sample to dissolve from a surface. Okay, by using a laser, it is possible that you can basically dissolve. Desorption, you know the phenomena of desorption, absorption, adsorption, and desorption. And by using a laser, it is possible that a sample which is present on a surface can be dissolved. Okay, so that is the basic principle involved in this matrix-assisted laser desorption ionization technique. Okay, laser ablation is the one. So when the laser is interacting with the sample, there are two things can happen. At the beginning, that the sample gets heated up, and then slowly it dissolving. And at the higher temperature, as the laser intensity is on for a long time, then the temperature, local temperature will be very much high. As a result, the sample gets heated up, and then it will form a plasma material which comprises of radicals, radical cations, and negatively spaced ions, etc. So it forms a plasma material of the sample, and slowly that will be dissolved. So that is the process of a laser ablation, and the laser ablation process is used in the technique. Principle is used in the MALDI technique. And MALDI technique, please remember that Koichi Tanaka developed, for which he awarded Nobel Prize in 2002. It is very good technique for DNA, RNA, proteins, and few thousands of to several thousands of proteins. Okay, this is very good technique, and in this technique, what we do is somewhat similar to chemical ionization technique. It's not so different, but the concept is slightly different. In the reagent gas CA chemical ionization technique, what we use that a reagent gas is used in excess quantity. As a result, the electron beam is allowed to interact with the first with the reagent gas. Later on, the primary ions which are formed from the interaction of the ion interaction of the reagent gas and the electron, those are allowed to interact with the other one, I mean the molecule, right? As a result, what we observed was actually a little fragmentation, not more than that, very little fragmentation. The same principle is actually used here also. Here, as the name suggests, matrix assisted. Here we use the sample is kept in a matrix, and the matrix can be we choose the matrix, we decide the matrix based on our analysis, and typically it is some molecule. Matrix is nothing but some other molecule. Okay, some other molecule in a large excess quantity we will take. And one of the primary quality of the matrix should have is that it should basically absorb the radiation from the laser. It should absorb the radiation from the laser. Only then, when you shine the laser on the matrix, which comprises of the sample, right? And initially, since the matrix material is in a large quantity, the matrix get basically interact with the laser, and it forms some kind of ions, which are then translated, which are then further will interact with the sample, and then fragmentation takes place. Okay, so please remember that I'm telling always the fragmentation. So we need fragments of the sample. So molecules, the sample have to be ionized. Only then it is possible that we can we can detect them in the chamber. Otherwise, it's not possible. The purpose of ion source or ionizer is to create ions. That's all. And as you can see here in this particular matrix, in this MALDI technique, these are some of the matrix like nicotinic acid is generally used one of the as a matrix for certain sample analysis. Similarly, just a minute. Benzoic acid. Similarly, benzoic acid derivatives. Okay, cinnamic acid derivatives. Okay, and then nitrobenzyl benzyl alcohol. These are some of the common matrix materials. What we do, our sample is mixed with these type of samples, and then the laser ablation process will be taken place, and then molecules get ionized automatically. And these are the wavelength at which since we are using nicotinic acid, this nicotinic acid matrix can basically absorb a 266 nanometer. Okay, and it will have absorption in this region, but most usually we use a 266 nanometer wavelength radiation, and the laser wavelength will be that much, and then it will dissolve the material. Okay, suppose if it is a benzoic acid, in that case also it is 266 this thing. Only in the case of aminopyrrazine and then carboxylic acid, for some analysis we use, in that case the 337 nanometer laser will be used. Okay, there are several lasers, UV lasers are there. Usually we use a UV laser. As you can see here, this region is a UV region. All these materials are absorbing UV region. Okay, when you shine the laser, these material, all these matrix material will basically absorb the energy, and that energy, because of that absorbed energy, they will basically get ionized, and those matrix ions will interact with the molecules, and then they form the fragmented ions. So that is the purpose, and this is a cartoon diagram. As you can see here, in the left hand side, a laser is basically bombarded on a sample. There is a metal surface, and the metal surface, it has a sample. As you can see, blue ones, that is the blue one is the matrix. Matrix is in the huge majority of the sample. The sample thing is basically your matrix, and then later on you do have the analytes. Your molecules also met. So your molecules, your analyte, and then matrix, those are mixed together, and then we shine laser, and then as a result, that slowly the sample gets dissolved initially. Later on, at the later stage, it will form even ions also. Okay, so that's the purpose of this. So that is the explanation about the MALDI technique, and these are the mass spectrum of MALDI-TOF thing, and for proteins and polypeptides. So this is a very good thing. Of course, it doesn't mean that we can't use it. They are very good for high molecular weight biomolecules. They are also equally good for certain chemical compound that we deal. Okay, but for biomolecules, they are really good. And another ionization technique, the electrospray. Electrospray is the another technique that we use it. Um, Electrospray, that this is a industrial principle that spraying, the car, if you take your car or any vehicle for painting, that they use this electron gun that to paint it, right? So they use very fine tip nozzle or nebulizer through which actually the paint basically sprayed onto the surfaces, right? The same thing happens here, that this electrospray ionization technique, this is also equally good uh, for the polypeptides, proteins, and oligonucleotides and inorganic species, synthetic polymers, and then which are having molecular mass of 1 lakh daltons. This is really good. And this electrospray is possible to conduct even at the atmospheric temperature and then atmospheric pressure. That is that one major advantage with the electrospray ionization. And in this method, the sample actually we pump through a stainless steel capillary, right? So we will have a capillary, a stainless steel capillary is there, through which the sample, which is mixed with the electrolyte, is pumped through this nozzle or capillary. Okay, and this nozzle is kept at a very high voltage potential difference. This nozzle tip is kept at a very high potential, and then as a result, that if it is a simple spraying, we don't find that it. Of course, any spraying, it will produce a liquid droplets, right? Aerosols, it will form, and the droplet may not have any charges. But if you apply under certain potential difference, then usually it so happens that the droplets will have some kind of charge. That depends upon what kind of charge you have. Okay, and what kind of charge that you are applying through the potential difference, that decide the charge of the liquid droplets. Okay, and similarly the nature of the sample. So nature of the sample and the kind of potential difference that you are applying through the tip of the nozzle, that you will get different type of charged liquid droplets. And the charged liquid droplet is basically amplified here and shown here. So this charged droplet will have lot of charges. It will have a cation, it have a negative, and many things will be there. Okay, and opposite to this, this spraying that we will apply in the process, there is a some kind of carrier gas is something that we use. Carrier gas. Okay, so carrier gas, like some argon, okay, argon, maybe some kind of inert gas is basically applied in the system after spraying continuously. As a result, these droplets try to evaporate. Why? Because the sample is mixed with the sample is mixed with the liquid conducting electrode, which is then sprayed under a potential difference. Therefore, it is having some kind of charge. Now these droplets having a lot of charges. Okay, and it is having a solvent molecule as well, right? Now when you basically apply a little bit of carrier gas, by pumping inert gases, so this carrier gas, what it does is basically it evaporates the liquid which is present in that. Okay, it will basically evaporates. If if the solvent molecules are losing from the droplet, then the size of the droplet comes down, right? It will basically, as the size of the molecule, the droplet size shrinks, the charge density becomes greater. The charge density becomes greater. Initially, it will be this much, very big, fine droplet. Okay, this is a big droplet, but as we are going to use the carrier gas which evaporates the liquid solvent molecules, it basically later it will come down to this kind of small one. Later it will come to this much. Later it will come to this much. So it will form smaller and smaller as the size of the droplet becomes smaller and smaller because of the carrier gas. Then the charge density becomes higher. You have so many charges, in a this much very huge area. So it is less charge density. This is having huge charge density as compared to this. This will have a huge charge density. That means what I'm trying to say is that as the droplet size becomes smaller and smaller, charge density becomes greater. As a result, because you can't keep so many charges in a small area, then what happens is that it will burst. It will burst and then it will form the uh, the fragmented ions. So that's the principle involved in this electrospray. Electrospray is a common concept. It's just spraying liquids. That is industrially well explored technique, which is basically employed with the mass spectrometers, and they named it as electrospraying. In this method, your sample is basically mixed with a solvent, a conducting liquid, and then it is basically sprayed into a chamber where under certain voltage it will be sprayed, and then it will form a kind of, as a result, since because of the nature of the sample and because of the conducting liquid, and also as we are applying the voltage, the droplets will have some charges. Okay, positively charged, negatively charges will be there, and then solvent molecule also will be there at the initial spraying. But later on, as we are having inside, there is a reagent gas. This reagent gas reduces the size of the droplets, and then the charge density becomes greater, and then finally beyond certain limit, this big fine charged droplets actually fragmented into individual fragments. That's how this principle works, and this is really good technique. And one important feature that one should remember is that, unlike many other techniques which I have discussed so far, the electrospray ionization produces multiple charged species. What do I mean with that? Usually, that the charge of the molecular ion in other ionization techniques, it is only one. Okay, but only in the case of electrospray, it so happened that the charge can be +2, +3, +7, +9, etc., etc. So m by z. So the z typically it is 1. On most of the ionization technique, it is a positive 1. But only in the case of ESI, it so happened that the Z can be +7, +9, +2, anything. It can be anything. So while interpreting the data, you just have to multiply. Uh, you just have to multiply the. Let's say this is the position, right? To determine the mass of your sample or the fragmented ion, you have to multiply this number, this m by z, into, right, with the z. Only then you will get the molecular mass. In the other case, like, since it is m by z already, z is 1, that obviously the molecular ion peak, whatever you see on the extreme right hand side, that you can take it as your molecular weight of the compound. But in this case, it is not possible that way, because the charge is different. The charge can be any number. Therefore, accordingly, you have to take it into the consideration. And on the slide, you can see here that the human parathyroid hormone, and then other interleukin. This is one type of protein, and then this type of peptides, and bovine serum albumin is also here. So this is a peculiar nature of the ESI technique. Okay, please remember this. Of course, for organic chemistry, what we use it, that will not be much problem. But when you are analyzing the biopolymers and so on, so that is what we observe. But in the case of simple organic chemistry, small molecules are having the molecular weight less than 1,000, so it's not a big deal. That Z value will be mostly it is 1. Okay, the other technique I would like to mention is the FAB technique. FAB is the fast atom bombardment ionization technique. Fast atom bombardment ionization. Fast atom means that we are going to bombard our sample with a fast atom. What is the fast atom? The fast atom is typically argon or xenon. So argon or xenon are basically accelerated very fastly to a huge accelerating voltage, and then that will be allowed to interact with your sample. Therefore, your sample get ionized. That's the technique, and this technique principle is also more or less the same principle which we have seen in the case of VA and then MALDI technique, where our samples get mixed with a matrix in the case of MALDI, right? The same thing happens here, that we use a condensed matter. Typically, in this case, we use some kind of liquids which are having very high boiling point. Our sample basically mixed with high boiling point liquids, which then basically allowed to interact with the fast atoms like xenon, argon, and so on, right? Then as a result, initially those high volume liquids basically get ionized. Later on, that will be translated, that will be interacting with the molecule, and then they get ionized. That's the process, general process that happens. So glycerol is one of the compound that generally we use it as a matrix, or maybe ethylene glycol. This type of matrix are basically used. And again, this FAB technique is very good technique for the compounds which are having molecular weight of about 10,000, of course, right? Of course, there is a way to produce this fast atom. How to get the fast atoms? Like argon, initially allowed to interact with the electron beam. As you know, the ionization potential of the inert gases are very, very high. Somehow the people will make it initially the accelerated argons, which are then allowed to interact with the usual argon, ground state organ. Then because of the this will have a huge translational energy, so which then will be given to the organ ground state, this one, and it will come back to the positively charged the organ cation. So this is what I was talking about, the fast atom. Fast atom is this. So this is typically organ. How it is different from the organ? The difference is that it's very, very fast, and it's having a huge translational energy, not the vibrational or rotational energy. It is having a huge translational energy. So as they get interacted with the sample, then their energy will be translated as a result. Only because of the translation energy, a little ionization takes place, not so much, right? Unlike the electron beam ionization technique. Okay, so with that, I have more or less covered the most of the techniques which are generally used in the as a ionizers. Right, I think I have taken almost more than 1 hour. Well, I think I will stop here. Maybe in the next class we can discuss about the mass analyzers. There are few analyzers. I don't want to go to the details, but then ionization is something very, very important. But the analyzer, I may not spend much time. But the next class onwards, we can discuss little more about. I mean, tomorrow, little more about the ionizers, and also more about the fragmentation rules and regulations. So with this, today I conclude my lecture. If you have any doubts, I'm happy to answer your doubts. Today we have discussed mostly a few techniques like electron ionization technique and CI ionization technique, matrix MALDI technique, matrix assisted laser ablation technique, and ESI technique and FAB technique. That's all. And next class, that is tomorrow onwards, we can discuss a little bit about the ionizers, how they work on, and what is the principle, and which I already pointed out that the electric field and the magnetic field are the ones actually will be used in the mass spectrometers to separate the ions. Okay, this thing we will discuss in the next class. If you have any doubt, probably I can take your doubts. Okay, fine. I think with this I will stop. Maybe tomorrow again, more or less the same time, we will meet and to discuss further in this subject. Thank you for attending the class.